Let's speak to Mark Regev, who's a senior advisor to the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Mr. Regev, thank you for joining us here on BBC News, as I know you have done over the last few days as this deal is being negotiated. I wonder, first of all, what was the breakthrough? What changed to enable this deal actually to be put to the Cabinet and the government last night and be approved?
Well, as my Prime Minister said publicly, there was an improvement in the number of people coming out. We had a situation where it wasn't a good offer. We were fighting to get more people out, and the Prime Minister approached President Biden and said, what can be done to make this deal better? And the deal was improved. And I think that allowed us to clinch it. And as you said correctly, the Israeli government approved it last night. And hopefully we will see in the next 4 days 50 of our hostages, including, as you've said, babies, toddlers, who've been brutally held by Hamas over the last 50 days almost. They will be home. But we're waiting to see it happen, of course.
And I know that there are hopes that this could be expanded because the list of Palestinian prisoners held in Israel approved for release is larger than the number of hostages who are going to be released from Gaza. So do you have an expectation that we may see a larger number of hostages released?
I'm not sure if I have an expectation, but I have a hope that we'll see more people released. The reason we put up that list of 300 security prisoners is because we want to be ready if that in fact does happen. But I have no guarantees that it will. But as you've reported, this is a temporary cessation of the fighting for 4 days to facilitate the release of hostages. And we are willing for every 10 hostages to give another day for the ceasefire. And I think, to be fair, the only reason this has happened now and that Hamas has agreed to this, they've not suddenly become humanitarians. People who kidnap babies are not humanitarians. But they've been under amazing pressure. The IDF has been hitting them hard. We've been destroying their military machine. We've been eliminating their top leadership. And they've been under amazing pressure. And I think that has forced them to accept this cessation of fighting. They needed a respite. They needed a break. We were hitting them hard. They were desperate for this timeout. And I think we were very right all along when we said we will only agree to a cessation of fighting in the framework of a release of our people. That has facilitated, that has worked. We are now seeing our people released.
What is your message to the families of male hostages who are being held? Because I spoke a little earlier to the mother of one 28-year-old man, Yotam Hain, and while of course any families are delighted to see a release, it is a difficult moment, isn't it, for those who know that their loved ones are not going to be in this initial release and who are perhaps concerned that not enough is being done to get all of those hostages home. What would you say to them?
Well, it's indeed a bittersweet day, because on one hand, 50 people are supposed to come out, but there are some 180 who are unaccounted for. And it's not just all the men, not all the women are released either. And it's difficult. I can only say that the Israeli government will do everything that can be done to have all the hostages released. And our problem here is Hamas. Hamas is a brutal, fanatic organization that gives no qualms whatsoever about murdering in the innocent. We saw the violence that they're capable of committing in the atrocities of October 7th. We see the way they look at Palestinian lives. And so we're dealing with these brutal people. It doesn't make getting our hostages out easy.
Who makes the decisions about which hostages are released? Is it Israel or is it Hamas?
I think we're working according to categories, and we prioritize the children and the women. That's our prioritization. And though I understand, I feel for people, let's say, who've got male relatives held hostage in Gaza, decisions had to be made, and those are the decisions that were made. And I think I understand people who are upset that their loved ones are not in this first 50 group, but I can assure them we will make every effort to get everyone out. The Prime Minister said so publicly last night, and we mean it. We want to see them all out.
I also wanted to ask you as well about the humanitarian situation in Gaza, because, of course, part of this agreement involves an increase in humanitarian aid being allowed in. But Oxfam have described this morning as taking a Band-Aid off a still bleeding wound. They say that the amount and the frequency are nowhere near enough to deal with the level of humanitarian need that exists now in Gaza. What are you going to do to help those civilians in a real measurable way in Gaza?
So we have talked about creating a humanitarian safe zone in the southern part of the Gaza Strip to the west of the city of Khan Yunis. We believe there should be tents there, a field hospital, that all the people who are fleeing fighting, and of course there's a respite in the fighting at the moment, but if the fighting is resumed, and it will be, there should be a safe location for civilians. And people should get out of harm's way and heed the advice of the IDF. We don't want to see innocent civilians caught up in the crossfire between the Israel Defense Forces and the Hamas terrorists. Hamas, of course, has the opposite goal. They have a policy of using civilians as human shields, of hiding underneath civilian areas, hiding under hospitals, hiding under mosques, and so forth. And I would remind you, it's not just Israel that talks about Hamas having this policy of deliberately using civilians to shield their war machine. The United States has said so, Great Britain has said so, the European Union has said so. This strategy of Hamas has been documented and is well known and is responsible for the terrible casualties that we've seen in the civilian population. We didn't want to see a single civilian casualty. It's Hamas that has created this crisis.
But according to the health ministry in Gaza, more than 14,000 civilians have now been killed. I just wanted to ask you, Mark Regev, before you go, we're seeing these live pictures. We can see smoke once again rising over Gaza, so the fighting is clearly continuing now. We're hearing reports that the ceasefire, the pause, will begin at 10 a.m. local time tomorrow. Is that something you can confirm?
I cannot confirm, but it needs to be said that the numbers you referred to about fatalities, that's the Hamas-controlled Ministry of Health in Gaza, and they, of course, have a propaganda interest in inflating those numbers. And, of course, all those numbers, if Hamas would have us believe, they're all civilians. Well, that's clearly not the case. We've killed thousands of Hamas terrorists, and we are confident of that. And so Hamas wants the world to believe that Israel is only hurt.
Civilians, though, aren't they, Mr. Regev? Children are always civilians, though, aren't they?
Correct. I agree with that. No one wants to see a single child killed. But I think when this conflict is over and we look at exactly at what's happened, if you will compare the IDF's behavior in this conflict together with other Western armies who've been in comparable situations against terrorists in urban areas like the fight against ISIS in Syria and in Iraq, I think you'll see the IDF's efforts to try to keep civilians out of the crossfire, that we were successful. If you compare us, as I say, to other Western armies in similar situations, I think we compare not badly at all. We even compare well.
Mark Regev, thank you for joining us here on BBC News, senior advisor to the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Let's talk a little bit